Good day everyone, this is Nemesis and today we are going to talk about world versus world. A lot of people have asked me in the past and I said I will make a video about this. They keep asking me what is a good build, what can I use on my Necromancer so I can own in world versus world. Before you can get a build that can own in world versus world, as people say, we need to understand your objective. What do you want to do? If you take a look at the map, as you can see, it's a really large map and there is a lot of areas filled with combat events, a lot of places where a lot of players engage each other in combat. So by owning, are we referring to killing the players at these locations, at these random locations on the map? Do you want to own, like you want to go solo in different places and kill opponents, a few opponents, one or two, as in 1 versus 1, 1 versus 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 1 versus 4 should be the maximum Necromancer potential? Do you want to intercept caravans? Do you want to assault sieges? Do you want to defend sieges? What do you mean by owning? In order to answer that question, we need to understand how world versus world works and what does victory mean. In world versus world, as you can see here, victory is achieved by owning the highest amount of points, which also gives a bonus for your server. How do you get the highest amount of points? Well, by capturing and holding key strategic place. Victory is obtained not by owning other players on the battlefield, by killing them. It's more complex than that. It's just not random mindless fighting. It actually has a higher purpose to it. So we need to be effective at certain things, not just at killing enemy players. We need to be effective at taking key structure location. And as we can see here, camps are worth 5 points. Towers are worth 10 points. Keeps 25 points. And the castle in the Eternal Battlegrounds is worth 35 points. The thing is, by owning, we are referring to, since this is an MMORPG, this is a role-playing game, after all, we are referring to progress. We are referring to making a difference. So how do you make a difference? I've talked in my previous videos about the game's equality and the game's balance. There are 1,000 players going against 1,000 players on the map, and how can you as a player make a difference? Some of you think that, yeah, I killed a few players and I'm strong at that and I made the difference. Well, is that really the case? This is not like structured PvP, in which if you 1v3 a few opponents, if you emerge victorious in a combat 1 against 3 other players, the rest of your team does a really good job in that short interval of time before they respawn. If you 1v3 some opponents in this map, you actually achieved nothing, because you will rarely find 3 opponents, and even if you kill them, you cannot change very much the course of the events on the map. So the difference, as any class, but we are referring to the Necromancer, is how can you better increase the effectiveness of the eternal battle? How can you help capture and hold strategic areas? So that is the thing. It may not look like much. A lot of people might think, yeah, I didn't kill so much, but you as a player can make a very big difference among 1,000 equal from the start players. I've talked about equality in the past, but you as an individual can still make a difference. How? Well, to answer this, I'm going to contradict a lot of posts that have been made on the forums. They say that a power build and a well build for the Necromancer can disown in a world v world event. So let's take a look. Here we are at guard tower. Let's say this was an enemy guard tower and you want to lay siege to it. If you had the wells build, you go up to the gate and you lay down a well. Very well. What now? How did you make the difference? How do you own? If, let's say, 10 defenders come out and charge you, you are not going, there is no build and no class that can take on 10 players. So how do you make a difference? Also, you will get, from this position, you will get oiled, you will get burning oil landing on top of you. So right off the bat, everything that is at really close range is not really effective. Besides, we are, as a Necromancer, we are a ranged class. So you need to be a bit sustainable, because most of the battles are going to be versus a high amount of opponents. So to answer the question, yeah, the Wells build, the bursting build, all of those builds that are good at bursting opponents, medium amount of opponents like 1v2, 1v3, yeah, those are good. And you may probably win those fights. You won the battle, but did you win the war? Did you make a difference? The answer is no. Trust me, if you 1v4 a lot of players, other players will keep coming and coming and coming and you achieve nothing at the end of the day. So the builds, all the other builds are not bad, they are good for owning players. But you need to think carefully, do you want to own players or do you want to win the war? Do you want to achieve a lot of points? Do you want to capture strategic location and bring glory and victory to your server? That is the real question. So we've discussed about if you want to lay siege to a location, if you want to defend the location. Let's say we are on this wall, and as you can see, these players could have been attackers. What do you do with the bursting build? You go outside and try to fight them all. No other players in this keep are going to follow you, so you are going to be alone versus very high amount of enemies. That's not good. Also, I've talked in my other Necromancer tutorials about the range. As you can see, I have range on my scepter, but it's limited. And if I switch to my axe, I don't even have range to like over here. Trust me on that. Also the wells, in order for them to be effective, you need to be outside. The minions don't actually do anything, especially if you have 5 minions versus 25 players, they're not going to do much. So how do you make a difference? Most of the scenarios are like this. There's going to be a lot of attackers here and here trying to lay waste to cannons or any other defensive capabilities, and the very tankier players are going to be right here near the gate or near a wall, let's say a gate in this scenario, with a battering ram. So they are going to constantly get support or back out from this location and keep poking the gate with a battering ram. So what can you do in this scenario? Do you burst them down? No, it's not effective, trust me, especially if there are 5 of them. The main bursting capabilities of the Necromancer are for single target, unless you use wells, and to use wells you need to go outside, and that's not good, trust me. Meanwhile, the players that I've said are around over here are going to attack you. So how do we make a difference? The answer is quite simple. As I've discussed in my staff video, we have Reaper's Mark for CCing. As you can see, it has a very nice range, a 40-second cooldown, and AoE fear. Also, I've discussed that the staff is sort of a jack of all trades weapon, and it adds bleeding, chilling, and transfers condition from allies to foes when triggered. All of these are AoE. So let's say we are on the wall and a few tankier opponents are trying to break down the gate. If you place one fear mark, they get feared and they can no longer attack the door. That sometimes may be the difference. A few seconds might make the difference between win or lose the keep. There are a few players that are coming from behind and they have supply in order to repair the gate, and they just needed 3 more seconds for the gate to last in order to repair it. And you could not offer that 3 seconds. But with fear, you can offer the 3 seconds needed to win the battle. And that's how you make a difference. Furthermore, if a few tankier opponents decide to go outside, you can sustain them from the ledge and make sure that once they get outside, they get the best kind of support in order to further increase the effectiveness of the defense. Another thing, since bursting is not really effective, you should go for condition. And you remember in the past that I kept praising the spell Epidemic, which applies vulnerability on yourself and spread the condition on a target foe to all nearby foes. Imagine if you had, I always say this, that a Mesmer is a Necromancer's best friend. Imagine if you have 2 or 3 more Necromancers and 2 or 3 more Mesmers on the wall defending with you. You can extremely quickly set a full 25 stacks of bleeding on the target, 5 or 10 more conditions, and if you use epidemic, all the enemies in a range of 1200 will take an insane amount of bleeding damage, of sustained damage. And be very careful, this is sustained damage. That means you can sustain this amount of damage, this pressure. You can put pressure on the attackers so that you may cripple the siege effort. Also imagine that is one player, one lonely necromancer among 100. And I already said how you can make a difference in 2 different ways. Imagine what 2 or 3 necromancers can do. Imagine if your fear could last longer and you can keep putting marks of fear. Imagine like 10 necromancers that would use Reaper's Mark on this location. If they time it just right, this location could always have a Reaper's Mark on the ground. So I think that with 20 necromancers, even if the gate goes down, the enemies can't actually enter, and that's really frustrating. All you need like 3 more guardians to put up a barrier, and the gate goes down and they cannot enter, and then the enemies get frustrated, maybe get flanked from behind. That is the difference between victory and defeat. This is how you can actually own in world versus world. It's not about yourself. You as a player are not going to make that much of a difference. Think about it. You have 100 or maybe 1,000 players. 200 of those may be other necromancers. How do you as a player make a difference, and how do you feel good about yourself making a difference? How do you ultimately own? Well, one man made the difference between winning or losing a keep. And same goes for assaulting. If they try to go outside, let's say you are at the gate, a few tankier players at the gate trying to break down the gate, and they decide to come outside and repel the offensive initiative. So you place a Reaper's Mark here, and as soon as they come outside, the more they are, the worse they will be. Those few seconds you give your allies, a few seconds of free hits, might make the difference between win or lose a siege. We've discussed what is going to own in world versus world and why, the motives, the objectives need to be very clear. The objective in world versus world is not to kill the opponent, that is just a secondary objective. The opponent is simply an obstacle between you and a keep, a guard tower, a castle, or anything of the sorts. The enemy is just an obstacle. So how do we pass that obstacle, and how do we ultimately take important strategic points, and at the end of the day we own? With epidemic, spreading an insane amount of conditions over a very large area, and it's only on 50-second cooldown. And with fear. So let's make a build that further improves the effectiveness of these 2 main concepts. So here we are in Heart of the Mists. We need to increase our fear duration and have a bleeding spec. And the longer the bleed lasts, the better, because you get the opportunity to stack multiple bleeds on the same target. And imagine at the siege, people are not going to have frames, there's going to be chaos, they are not always organized, and they don't always have the ability to remove the conditions that you have stacked. So you stack very easily a very high amount of conditions, because you're not going to be the only one, on a very large area of opponents. And since at siege people tend to get clumped up, this where is it? Hold on. This spell is going to absolutely make miracles. Trust me on that. Let's make a build that amplifies conditions and fear. Refund traits. We know that curses is for condition damage, and we discussed what precision does for the condition type build. So let's look at ways we can increase bleeding duration. We see here that we have conditions inflicted by the scepter skills last 30% longer. This is very good for us. Fear does damage. It's always a nice option since you are going to be using fear a lot. 20% more bleeding duration. That's from the start, that's 50% bleeding duration. If you remember, from if you max out spite, you only get 30% condition duration increase. If you look at all the other traits at spite, death magic or blood magic, you will find nothing really worth investing a full trait path in that would increase the effectiveness of fear and condition damage. You have to take my word for it. Death Shroud recharges 50% faster, and we know that in Death Shroud we also have another fear. Fear you inflict lasts 50% longer. That's already extremely good. That's 50% longer fear, and you have one fear from staff, one fear from Death Shroud. All Death Shroud skills recharge 50% faster. That means you can use fear more often. And we have 10 points left, and those points I usually put them in Symphon Health whenever you crit, because even on a condition type build we still use critical strike chance, and even if you don't use that, even if you don't crit for that high amount, it's still a little bit of health regeneration, and along the 5-second regeneration when your health reaches 90%, it's really good. So that's one way you can obtain a good world versus world build with which you can own, as in make a difference where it actually counts. So we covered what the build should look like and the reasons behind that. We so far have 53% bleeding duration and 50% fear duration. This is pretty good. One last thing we need to look at are the runes that you can put in your gear. There are quite a high variety of runes, but we are only interested in the ones that increase bleeding duration and fear duration. As we can see, we have 50% bleed duration on Rune of the Afflicted if we take 2 runes of the affliction. If we take more than 2 runes, we only get condition damage and poison duration. That's not as important, because if we have a longer bleeding duration, we have the opportunity to stack more bleeds on the target, and that's where the damage comes from, from stacking. So we take 2 of these, valuable. We go down, we see Rune of the Centaur, also bleeding duration if we take 2 of them, and the other effects that you get from more runes of the Centaur are not really that interesting. So again we take 2 runes, and the last runes that we are interested in is again 50% bleeding duration from 2 runes of the Crate. So if we apply this to our gear, you see that I have 50% times 3. That's 45% bleeding duration, and with the bleeding from the build we have around almost 100% bleeding duration, and the bleeding duration cap is 100%, so we are good. We can have a skill such as Bloody's Power, which has 30-second cooldown and has a very high amount of bleeding damage. Imagine on a bleeding spec, that skill does about 7,000 damage on a 30-second cooldown with a 30-second duration. If you amplify that with this bleeding spec, you will get to about 14,000 damage from just one skill. Use Epidemic on that, and that's 14,000 damage in an area of 1,200. It is possible in a defending a keep scenario, because people are going to be grouped up. They are not all going to be rushing you because they can't, because of the walls that are defending your position. So this is where you can actually be very effective using this kind of build. This is what this kind of build was made for sieging, for world v world. Your main weapon should always be the staff, because of its range, fear and support for your team, and the secondary weapon set should be the scepter with the dagger for the AoE bleeds and the blind from the offhand weapon dagger. This is my take on how to be effective in World vs. World. This is why you can actually make a difference and ultimately own. If you do not, if that's not what you are looking for, feel free to make power builds. I will make in structured PvP in my upcoming videos about structured PvP a few power builds that can really dominate in 1v1, 1v2 actually. You can always opt for those. but that will not bring you victory at the end of the day, because world versus world is not about mindless killing of hundreds of opponents, hundreds of enemies. That's not world versus world is all about. I'm trying to make shorter videos. A few of you have told me that my videos are too long. There's just so much information that you guys need to know. Also, if you're watching this video and you haven't seen my Necromancer tutorials and you wish to learn more, go check them out. You will see that it all adds up, the builds, the playstyle, everything, and there are multiple playstyles. I think I covered most of them and the reasoning behind those playstyles. Maybe the Necromancer isn't for you, but if you feel that the Necromancer is for you, you want to play the Necromancer, I've made guides that will help you achieve a very high effectiveness in multiple playstyles with the Necromancer. So if you found this video helpful, feel free to comment in the section below, subscribe if you want to see more of this, maybe give it a thumbs up. My next video is going to be a dungeon tutorial from the Necromancer's point of view. As soon as they fix dungeons, there is a small bug at the moment with dungeons. You cannot enter explorable mode with a party, but it should be fixed by Tuesday, so in about 2 days. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, enjoy your gaming